Hello everyone and welcome. It's nice to see so many faces. So today I'm going to tell you about some of the work that we've been doing trying to understand inherited cancer risk, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that is, and one of the programs that we have in place to overcome that risk. So let's start with what we know about what causes cancer. So we know that there are a number of environmental exposures that can increase our risk of developing cancer. So a couple of examples that I'm sure we're well aware of is smoking. So smoking can increase our risk of developing lung cancer as well as developing many other types of cancer. We also know that if we spend too much time in the sun, we have an increased risk of developing skin cancers like melanomas. And there are a number of other exposures as well that we know in the environment that increase our risk of getting cancer. We know also that these exposures accumulate over time. So the older that we get, the more risk we have of developing cancer. It's much more common for an older person to develop cancer than a younger person, and that's because they've had a lifetime of exposure to a number of different factors that are potentially harmful in terms of developing cancer. We also know that we inherit our genetic makeup from our parents. So we get half of our DNA from our mother and we get half from our father, and that comes together and gives us our own unique genetic code. Now, sometimes the genetic code that we inherit can mean that we have an increased risk of developing cancer. So in other words, the damaging gene changes that cause cancer can run in families and can be passed down from parents to children. And this is what we mean by inherited cancer risk. For most cancers, we don't know why they develop, but for in about 5% of cases, we understand the underlying genetic change that has contributed significantly to that cancer developing. And in these families where we know what this genetic change is, they're said to have a hereditary cancer syndrome. Now, probably the most well-known hereditary cancer syndrome is hereditary breast and ovarian cancer, and that was brought to prominence in 2013 by Angelina Jolie when she revealed that she carried a gene change in the BRCA1 gene that meant that she had an increased risk of ovarian and breast cancer. And she, in fact, decided to have her breasts and ovaries removed to reduce that risk. But there are a number of other hereditary cancer syndromes that we know about caused by changes in genes other than BRCA1. And one of the common characteristics in families that have hereditary cancer syndromes is that cancers develop at an early age, a much earlier age than what we see in the general population. And this is because the damaging gene change that has been inherited by these individuals gives them a head start in developing cancer compared to people that don't have these gene changes. But there are lots of young people that develop cancer, and we don't understand at this current time what the gene changes are that are contributing to them developing cancer. But because they've developed cancer at an early age, we think that it's very likely that they do in fact have gene changes that have contributed to them developing that cancer. So young people with cancer are a very important group for us when we're trying to understand more about the heritability of cancer. So we've invited young people with cancer to be involved in our research here at Garvan. And the particular study I'm talking about is called the Cancer Risk Study. So we have more than 1,200 young people with cancer that have generously become involved in our program, and we're hoping to increase that to 3,000 people over the next few years. So we're using the power of whole genome sequencing to unravel an individual's genetic makeup. And we're very lucky here at the Garvan because we have a very large sequencing facility that allows us to do this type of work at quite a large scale. So I thought I'd talk a little bit more about whole genome sequencing, just to give you a little bit of background about what that means. So all of us, our bodies are made up of billions of cells, and within each of the cells in our body, there's a copy of our complete genetic code. Now, this genetic code is packaged on chromosomes. They're large structures. There are genes that make up those chromosomes, and the DNA actually makes up the genes. And we can break down the DNA even further into 4 specific letters, if you like. So we can think about our entire genetic code as being one long sentence. And just like with any sentence, if we insert words or take words out or we move the words around, then the sentence doesn't quite make sense. And if we think about that in terms of our genetic code, if the same thing happens in our genetic code, then that starts to have an impact on our health. So whole genome sequencing really is the technology that allows us to obtain a complete copy of an individual's entire genetic code, or a copy of their complete sentence. In the cancer risk study, we're comparing the genetic codes of young people with cancer. We're comparing that to genetic codes of people that have never had cancer, and we're trying to look at the differences so we can try and work out what some of these gene changes are that are contributing to people developing cancer. And we're very much just at the start of this very exciting project at the moment. So as part of the cancer risk study, and as well from some of our other programs of work and from our clinical colleagues as well, people have been identified as being at risk of developing cancer anywhere in their bodies, and that is due often to hereditary cancer syndromes. So in other words, people have inherited damaging gene changes that mean they are at risk of developing cancer anywhere in the body, and we call this a multi-organ cancer risk. So we're all familiar with some cancer screening or surveillance programs that are within our community at the moment. So we're probably familiar with mammograms and breast MRI for breast cancer. We all know about colonoscopies and the bowel test kits that we can get from the chemists for colorectal cancer. But there really aren't any surveillance programs or recommendations for people who are at risk of developing cancer anywhere in their bodies. So the next program of work that I want to tell you briefly about is a program that we've put together to try and investigate how we manage this so-called multi-organ cancer risk. So a few years ago, we began a program looking at whole body surveillance. So we're investigating the use of whole body MRI that takes place annually. We really wanted to understand, firstly, whether people could tolerate being part of the program. So whether emotionally and physically it was something that they were happy to take part in, and that it was something that was okay from their perspective. We also wanted to understand whether we could actually pick up cancers in these individuals at an early enough stage where we could make a difference for these people. So I want to give you a snapshot into our results so far in this program. So we have 76 people that have hereditary, one or another hereditary cancer syndrome that are taking part and having annual whole body scans. Over the last few years, we've completed 153 whole body scans in these individuals, and I'm pleased to say that we've picked up 14 new cancers in these individuals that people didn't know about prior to having the scan. And you can see that the cancers have been picked up. I've indicated here the cancers that we have detected and where in the body they have been located. And I'm more pleased to say that actually these individuals have been treated curatively. So we were able to pick up the cancers at a stage where we were able to make a difference in these people's lives. And also, I talked about whether the scans were tolerated. People have actually been very happy taking part in the program. It hasn't been an issue for them, the time in the scanner, and they haven't been too worried about the scans. So the whole program has actually been tolerated very well by the individuals involved. Perhaps the impact of the program can best be illustrated with Brett's story here. So Brett is a postie. He has a lovely wife and two gorgeous children that you can see pictured here, and Brett came onto our whole body program a few years ago. In Brett's first couple of scans, everything was clear and we didn't pick anything up, but in the third year of his scans, we picked up 2 cancers in his abdominal organs, and pleasingly they were removed, and Brett was healthy and well. In the subsequent year, we actually picked up another cancer as well. So Brett's had 3 cancers picked up as a result of being in the program. I'm pleased to say that from a couple of years ago when this happened, and he's healthy and well at the moment. Brett's very happy to share his story, and he's very vocal in his support and saying how the whole body MRI scan, the availability of it has really changed his life. And in fact, he says that it has saved his life. So we're very grateful to Brett for sharing his story, as we're grateful to all of our participants in our study, in our research studies, who generously give up their time and often their samples as well to be part of our research. So our work is having an impact on clinical practice. Some of the advice given to some people that are at risk of multi-organ cancer has been altered by the research that we have been doing here at Garvan. Whole body MRI is now recommended for people with Li-Fraumeni syndrome, which is a particularly nasty hereditary cancer syndrome in which people have a risk of getting cancer anywhere in their body. So we really are making a difference in people's lives with the work that we have done so far on this. So just to finish off, to let you know that our work is ongoing. The cancer risk study, we're continually inviting young people to be involved in the program. We're trying to understand more about inherited cancer risk. We are continuing our whole body MRI study, looking at surveillance in people at multi-organ cancer risk and how we can improve management for those individuals. We're in the process of applying for a Medicare rebate to cover the costs of these whole body MRI scans, because as you can imagine, these conditions run in families and these things are quite expensive, so we're trying to alleviate that for these individuals and their families. And of course, most importantly, we're trying to improve outcomes for individuals and families affected by heritable cancer, and we really are hoping to influence healthcare beyond 2020 and really lessen the burden of cancer on society generally. Thank you for listening.